in Qatar are promising better conditions for construction workers there. An estimated 1.8 million foreigners are working on projects related to the biggest event on the football calendar, but Qatar has been widely criticized over the treatment of those workers so far. Their situation is the subject of today's Inside Look, and joining me for that is James Lynch in London. James, thank you for joining us. You're Amnesty International's researcher on migrants' rights in the Gulf. Now, you published a report entitled The Dark Side of Migration a few months ago. Set the stage for us first, if you will. How bad are the working conditions of the migrant workers there in Qatar?
Well, I mean, we know from independent research that around 1 in 5 migrant workers in Qatar face, pay delays, and 90% have their passports confiscated. So we already knew before we started our research that these problems were there, and they're not uncommon. I think what we found is that there are very consistent. Workers can face long periods without pay. They can face harsh, dangerous working conditions. Some will face problems leaving the country, and at their worst, I mean, we did see some severe crises, with large groups of workers unpaid for a long time, and unable to leave the country, and sometimes really desperate. So they're actually, in need of food assistance.
James, now, the organisers of the World Cup have just issued this 50-page report. One of the measures says it will penalise contractors who violate the welfare of the workers. Is that enough?
Well, I mean, these standards, which apparently will apply to World Cup stadiums, so it's only really a relatively small proportion of the infrastructure that is being built before the World Cup. These standards, if they're implemented, obviously that would be an improvement in the conditions of those workers. Because what we've seen too often before in Qatar is that there are standards there in the labour law, but they're not enforced. So the key question is, can the World Cup organisers enforce these protections, which they've set out in this document? I think we want to see more detail about how they'll do that. The standards at the moment are rather vague about what will happen if a company doesn't comply, and so that's what we're really calling that committee to do. But ultimately, we need to see the government do more to actually reform the wider system, because that's the only way that workers who are working on, for example, roads and railways and hotels will be protected. That is all necessary for the World Cup too.
Well, what kind of pressure can be put on the government there in Qatar to make sure that these new standards are enforced, that the system is reformed as you would hope?
Well, obviously, Amnesty International and other organisations, will be continuing to put pressure on the government. But also, there are many other bodies that can play their role as well. And it's notable that, in November, FIFA appeared to take a slightly stronger line on this issue, having really given the world mixed messages before and made soundings as if it wasn't its responsibility. We believe FIFA does have a responsibility. It's good to see that now FIFA appears to want to engage in this issue and actually work with the Qatari authorities to address these abuses and put in place, sustainable changes, sustainable reforms that will really, work for the long haul. What we want to see is Qatar take the opportunity of the World Cup. It's got this huge spotlight on it, and at present, as you mentioned in your introduction, it's largely got criticised. So what we're saying to Qatar is take the opportunity, make bold reforms, and get credit for doing the right thing. These standards, whilst we would always, want to see positive efforts to improve worker welfare, these are not reforms. We mustn't confuse this issue. So we really still need to see the government take the lead on this issue.
James, how much do these human rights issues affect the average football fan? Is there any way that they could get on board with this to try to change things ahead of this World Cup, or have you moved toward getting that sort of movement in place?
Well, I think, if football fans, and we hope football fans will be, very much aware of these issues and interested in them, I think what they can do is engage with their national football associations, because that is what FIFA is made up of. It's the member states of FIFA. And I think we would want to see, national football associations engaging at the highest level in FIFA and saying, actually, this matters to us. This isn't a side issue. This isn't, a distraction from the main issue, which is whether the World Cup should be held in summer or winter. This is a fundamental issue that FIFA needs to engage in. So I think football fans can play a really important role.
All right. Thank you so much for that, James, for taking the time to speak to us. That's James Lynch, Amnesty International's researcher on migration.